Visitors to Scotland's Loch Ness have sworn that they have seen a monster coming up from the depths.
It was about 50, 60 feet long, and for a moment there, everybody on that ship just froze.
Off the far south coast of New South Wales, where the continental shelf drops away hard and fast into water most Australians will never see, 3 men went out chasing gemfish before sunrise and came back with something they still cannot explain. What happened to them that morning near Twofold Bay has never made the evening news. It has never been written up in a marine biology journal. It exists only in a short, grainy video, a sonar log nobody can fully account for, and 3 sets of scratch marks pressed into the side of a working fishing boat. This is that story. Twofold Bay sits near the town of Eden, a place with a strange relationship to large sea creatures long before this encounter ever happened. For decades, local whalers told stories of an orca that supposedly helped hunt baleen whales alongside human crews, herding them into the bay in exchange for a share of the kill. Most people treat that story as colorful history now, a curiosity for the local museum. But it says something about this stretch of water. The seabed here doesn't slope gently. It falls away in a series of steep underwater cliffs, dropping past 1,000 meters within a few kilometers of the coast. It is one of the few places in southern Australia where deep, cold, nutrient-rich water sits almost directly beneath a boat you could paddle out to on a calm afternoon. Ray Mitchell had fished these waters for 34 years. He held a coxswain's ticket, had crewed and later skippered vessels chasing everything from flathead to deepwater gemfish, and was, by every account from people who knew him, an unshakably practical man. Not someone who told stories for attention. Not someone inclined to see things in the water that weren't there. With him that morning was Warwick Doyle, who had worked alongside Ray for close to 9 years and had spent time before that on abalone boats further down the coast, diving in conditions most people would never volunteer for. The third man on board was Cody Wynn, 19 years old, on his 4th trip out with Ray, still learning where the lines went and which knots actually held under strain. The morning itself gave no warning. Flat calm, a light haze sitting low over the water, the kind of conditions gemfish boats wait weeks for. They had set their gear before first light and were working the lines roughly 9 kilometers offshore, over water the chart put it just under 500 meters deep. Around 20 past 6, the sounder picked up a contact, sitting at approximately 450 meters. Ray has said since that he almost didn't look twice. A single strong return at that depth usually means one of 2 things: a large solitary fish or interference bouncing off a thermal boundary. Neither is worth stopping the boat for. What made him look again was the way the return started to climb. Not scattering, not drifting the way a loose school of fish does when it feeds. It held its shape and rose steadily, like something deliberately changing depth rather than something being pushed by current. Within a few minutes, the water off the port side began to change color, a wide patch going from its usual blue-black to something closer to slate gray, as though a shadow the size of a house had slid in just beneath the surface. Then it broke the surface tension without breaking the surface itself, close enough that its outline showed clearly through the water. Warwick was the first to say something, and what he said, according to both other men, was simply, "That's not a whale." All 3 stood at the rail and watched a shape pass beneath the hull that none of them could put a name to. Ray estimated it at somewhere between 18 and 22 meters. Their boat measured 12 meters stem to stern, and the creature, whatever it was visibly longer than the vessel carrying them. The body was broad through the middle and strangely flat, more like a wide, thick ribbon than the rounded cylindrical shape most large marine animals have. Its surface looked matte rather than glossy, a dark charcoal color, with faint mottling that none of them could describe with any precision afterward, because none of them could agree on exactly what the pattern looked like once they tried to put it into words days later. What struck all 3 of them independently, when investigators eventually did ask them separately, was the movement. It did not move like a whale, driving itself with an up-and-down beat of a tail. It moved with a slow, continuous side-to-side ripple that ran the entire length of its body, unhurried, as though speed had never once been a concern for whatever this animal was. Cody, the least experienced of the three, and the one with no professional habit of downplaying strange things at sea, managed to pull his phone out and record 35 seconds of footage before the animal sank back into deeper water. The footage is unremarkable to look at on a phone screen: dark water, a shifting gray mass, the kind of thing easy to dismiss from a thumbnail. But paired with what the other two men described, and paired with the sonar log the boat's navigation unit had been recording automatically the entire time, it becomes considerably harder to wave away. That sonar log is, in some ways, the most interesting piece of evidence to come out of the encounter. A loose aggregation of fish produces a scattered, shifting return. Dozens of small blips moving independently of one another. A thermal layer produces a flat horizontal band that simply sits there. What the unit recorded that morning was neither. It was a single dense, continuous return that held its shape and moved as one coherent mass from roughly 450 meters up toward the surface and back down again over the course of about 6 minutes. Whatever triggered that reading was solid enough and large enough for the electronics to register it as a single object rather than noise. Before the animal descended for the final time, it passed close enough along the starboard side that something made contact with the hull. Nobody on board felt it happen. All three men were fixed on the water, not the fiberglass. It was only once they were back at the wharf, hosing salt off the deck, that Warwick noticed 3 parallel grooves pressed into the gel coat above the waterline, each a few centimeters wide, spaced roughly a hand's width apart, running the same direction along maybe half a meter of hull. Not deep enough to threaten the boat, just enough to leave a mark, the kind of contact you would expect from something enormous brushing past with almost no force behind it at all. 2 explanations tend to surface quickly whenever a story like this gets told, and both deserve a fair hearing before being set aside. The first is the oarfish, a genuinely spectacular animal capable of growing past 8 meters, long, silver, ribbon-shaped, and moving through a similar rippling motion. It is, on paper, the closest thing science already has on the books to what these 3 men described. The problem is proportion. An oarfish is narrow, roughly the width of a person through its thickest section, built more like an enormous strap than a solid animal. It does not displace a wide column of water the way something with real mass would, and it is difficult to imagine one producing the dense, solid sonar returned the boat's instruments logged that morning. The second common explanation is that a tightly packed group of smaller animals, perhaps a large bait ball or a pod of something unremarkable, created the illusion of a single giant shape from a distance. This tends to fall apart on the same detail that the oarfish theory does. Coordinated movement in a group of animals produces a shimmer, a constant subtle adjustment as individual bodies jostle for position. What 3 witnesses and 35 seconds of footage all agree on is a single, unified ripple running through one continuous body. Groups don't move like that. Individual animals do. This part of the coast has thrown up unexplained material before, though never with quite this much corroborating evidence attached. In the mid-1990s, a CSIRO deepwater trawl survey working a similar depth range off the New South Wales continental shelf brought up a badly decomposed carcass that several crew members described, in notes later filed with the expedition report, as unlike anything catalogued in their reference material. By the time specimens could be properly examined on shore, decomposition had gone too far to draw firm conclusions, and the final report settled on probable large elasmobranch, species indeterminate. Probable is doing a great deal of work in that sentence. Indeterminate is doing even more. Zoom out further, and the pattern gets harder to dismiss as coincidence. The coelacanth, a fish believed extinct for around 66 million years, turned up alive in a fisherman's net off South Africa in 1938 and stunned a scientific community that had built entire timelines assuming otherwise. The giant squid, dismissed for centuries as maritime folklore invented to explain missing ships, was not photographed alive in its natural habitat until 2004, well into an era of satellite imaging and deep ocean submersibles. New species of beaked whale, some of the largest mammals we know almost nothing about, are still being formally identified from little more than a stranded skull every few years. The ocean does not merely hide large animals from us. It hides the fact that they were ever there at all, sometimes for centuries at a stretch. So what was under Ray Mitchell's boat that morning? Nobody can say with confidence, and any honest account of this story has to sit with that discomfort rather than resolve it. One possibility is a known type of animal, a cephalopod or an unusually large fish, reaching a size or exhibiting a shape simply never documented before in a part of the ocean humans rarely observe closely. The cold, oxygen-rich water along this stretch of shelf is exactly the kind of environment where a slow-growing animal could live for an extremely long time without ever coming near a boat, a diver, or a camera. Another possibility is a marine mammal with an unusual body plan, something within the beaked whale family perhaps, a group so poorly studied that entirely new members are still being added to the list. The horizontal, whole-body undulation the witnesses described argues against most mammals, whose spines flex vertically rather than side to side, but biology has a habit of producing exceptions to its own rules in places nobody has thought to look closely enough. What happened after the sighting may be the strangest part of the whole account. Ray reported it, handed over the footage, and cooperated with a handful of people who initially expressed interest. Photographs of the hull markings were taken. Then, over the following months, interest simply thinned out and disappeared, the way institutional curiosity often does when a case refuses to resolve into something tidy and publishable. No one ever sat the three men down and told them what they had seen. Not an oarfish, not a bait ball, not a trick of morning light. Nothing at all. The silence, in its own way, has become as much a part of this story as the sighting itself. Ray still runs the same water off Eden. He has said he watches the sounder differently now, that every strong contact at depth gets his full attention in a way it never used to. He does not know what passed beneath his boat that gray morning, and by his own account, he has made a kind of peace with not knowing. What he has not made peace with is the certainty that whatever it was is still down there, somewhere past 400 meters, in water most of us will spend our entire lives never once looking into. What do you think slid beneath that boat off Eden that morning? Something known to science and simply never seen at that size, or something the record books haven't caught up to yet. Whatever it was, the water off the New South Wales coast is still largely unmapped, and if this story is right about one thing, it's that the ocean is in no hurry to explain itself.